into multiple destinations. Hopefully it's working. So hi everyone, welcome to the event today. And my name is Limor, and I'm the director of mentorship at Power to Fly. And today I'm so happy to host Katya. And Katya is one of our mentors and an incredible leader, incredible product leader, and also a coach. And she's going to talk today about how to become a product leader. So without further ado, Katya, I'll let you fill in the blanks in my introduction and teach us everything you know about product leadership.
Thank you, Limor. Hi, everyone. So good to see all of you and some familiar faces. They kind of bring my nervousness down. So really good to see you, Kelsey, and everyone else who joined. Thank you, and everyone else who is watching us on LinkedIn Live and YouTube. Sounds like projecting to the world. So I'm going to share. It's actually first time when I have my presentation in Canva, in the spirit of product management, trying the new tools. It's like I'm ditching the slides from Google and everything else and trying Canva. Actually a really good tool. They added quite a few cool things.
I love Canva. I use it for several years. It's incredible tool. If you don't know Canva,
definitely check it out.
Definitely check them out. They have a free for all plan, and I'm on their pro plan, which include more features. It's absolutely incredible, not just for presentations, but for any digital asset.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like now, I wish we were spoke people for Canva, but we're not. I do use now for everything. But today I'm actually really excited to talk with you about product leadership. And my intention for this webinar is since we kind of have this, what seems like a very private and small group, maybe we can, obviously outside of people who listen to us over these streamed channels, my hope is that it's not just going to be me talking and sharing, but to really make it a little bit more interactive so that we can have a little bit of a conversation. And the reason I called my presentation "How to Transition to Product Leadership in 12 Months," because I become a believer that once you know what you want, once you set an intention, you know your goal and start working backwards, creating the milestones and really finding support from people, your manager, your peers, your mentors. It's very possible if you're a senior product manager to really transition into the official role. But there is something else about leadership that many of us in product world, we don't talk about. We think that leadership starts when I get a title, once I become a group product manager, once I become a director. And what I've also come to believe and have experienced is that leadership starts with you. It starts with me. It starts with us claiming the space. And in a way, how Churchill used to say is that you got to step into the arena and really claim that leadership. So leadership may start even when you're an associate product manager or a product manager by increasing your scope. And that's something we're definitely going to talk about. But before we do, let me kind of quickly tell you about agenda. So I'm going to start with a quick intro and a structure. And I already mentioned a few things about a structure that I would like to make it a little bit more interactive if we could. We're going to talk about differences between being a product manager and a product leader. And we'll move on to Complexities Framework. Complexities Framework is the framework that my co-founder, head of product, and myself, we created as a part of our career program. And this is really the framework that I've used with my mentees and I've used with my clients who are in that position of being ready for leadership, be it official title or be it just stepping into the arena. And we'll close with some conversations and Q&As. So while I'm doing, kind of starting us with the structure, I'm actually really curious where you join us from today. I know we have just a few people, but just curious, you can type into the chat box, and Limor, if you can read for us where people are joining from.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm joining from Israel. We have Kelsey from Virginia, Gurvin from Toronto, Michelle from San Diego. Welcome.
And I'm from Costa Rica. Kind of sounds like we all over the place. And I think
we have Atlanta as well.
Nice.
Is from Atlanta. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, welcome the world. Welcome every part of it. Thank you for sharing that. So a little bit about myself. I usually go by Katya, even though my full name, and on LinkedIn, everywhere else you would see Katerina Suchkova. I've started product management about a decade ago and really tried out the startups and big enterprises. I think my sweet spot kind of happened to be B2B. At some point, maybe it was like 2016 or 2017, I wrote an article that, B2B is not sexy, but I still like it. And I wrote about the B2B product management as the space to be, because I really felt the connection to customers. But that really happened to be my sweet spot. I spent a few years at ServiceNow, and most recently at 15.5, where I led a team of senior product managers. Since early March of this year, I moved full-time into coaching, and I really combine right now coaching with some training and education, because I'm a true believer that knowledge doesn't have to stay with me. And to grow and develop the new generation of product leaders and product managers, we really need to empower them with tools, knowledge, wisdom, and experience that people like me, or even those who have even more experience and knowledge, already obtained. So I'm trying to really combine both coaching and some training, but mostly if we talk about coaching, I'm more about asking you questions and kind of guiding you towards identifying your challenge and figuring it out. So without any further ado, let's talk about what is the difference between being a product manager and a product leader. And you'll see that during my next maybe 15 minutes or 20, I will answer some of the questions that a few of you actually pre-submitted. Question: what common problems are companies expecting product leaders to solve? How to expand your scope? In fact, the Complexities Framework that I will be sharing is the way to expand your scope. And the last one is: what are the necessary skills to jump up the product leadership ladder, let's say from senior PM to GPM or director of VPM. So I hope I do have a chance to, and you will see how I answer those. And if not, we can always cover them also at the end. So let's start with the product managers. So the way I like to think about product managers as individual contributors is that we tend to focus on depth, right? So we really go deep down the rabbit hole of our problem domain. We learn about customers, we learn about markets, we learn about problems, and we really want to be experts in that. And we, in a way, develop this tunnel vision, which is great because that's what makes us good product managers. That's what makes us very successful, at what makes us become senior product managers, right? Because we keep doing better and more of what we were doing before. And the way you could start thinking about it is, as individual product managers, as individual contributors, we really think about, who am I serving or who am I working with? And it really has to do with you managing the team, and a team is engineers, designers, UX researchers. And when I say managing, I obviously don't mean direct management, right? It's all about working with your peers and partners, but in a way, it's an official management that's happening there. We also work a lot with stakeholders, and we also talk about how we manage stakeholders. And for me, I think the breakthrough happened when I stopped thinking about managing stakeholders, and instead I started partnering up with them. And I think that's also part of that transition from being an IC to also being a leader. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. We also focus really on the discovery, hopefully, right? Hopefully it's something that we do more than we do execution and delivery. But really discovery and delivery are the two areas that we get really, really good at. And by the time we're senior product managers, we have years under our belt to be really good at that. And we either create our own roadmap or we contribute to a company's roadmap, depending on the way our product team is structured. And really the responsibility lies behind kind of helping to create a short-term strategy, mostly for your problem area though. It's a good team when you actually have a chance to contribute to a broader PM org strategy. But most of the time you will really be kind of working with a short-term strategy on that.
Katya, sorry for stopping you. Are you sharing something? Because I don't see anything, by the way. I don't know if you're sharing, if you thought that you're sharing your screen, but we don't see any slides.
I thought I did. Wow. Thank you for letting me know. All right. Let's...
All right. Yes, we see it now. So we just need to present. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, I just realized that maybe you thought that you're sharing.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. So with that, since I talk a little bit about product manager, I'm actually curious to hear from some of you. What do you think are the top 3 skills for product managers? And again, I mentioned I do want to make it a little bit more conversational, so I invite a courageous soul to step in and maybe share what do you think are the top 3 skills for product managers based on kind of what I already mentioned and based mostly on your experience and where you are in your career.
So let's say execution and product sense.
Great, execution and product sense. Yep. That's kind of the delivery, what I've mentioned, and the product sense that probably goes to the discovery part. Yep. Anything else?
Kelsey says empathy, curiosity, and time management. And yeah, go ahead. And Gurvin said prioritization and decision making.
All of them are important, right? It just shows that we can't really even say what are the top 3 because prioritization is really important. Time management is important. Kelsey is so right? Because we get there's just so much on our plates as product managers that if we're not good at that, we're gonna drop something along the way, and probably what we're gonna drop is going to be an important thing.
Yeah, I can relate to prioritization a lot because I wasn't a product manager, but I worked a lot with product management, and prioritization is one of the tough ones, right? Because you need to make tough decisions. I also would add curiosity, kind of second what Kelsey said, curiosity, because you want to kind of understand how the market, what's the market fit, what's the competition, who are your clients, what are they thinking, what do they want?
Exactly. Yeah, and I would even say that prioritization, it's almost like the curiosity, it's what potentially gets us in the field, right? Because we are so curious about all the things that kind of come together when we're making a product. So I agree with that. And prioritization is, even how to prioritize your curiosity. Where do you allocate that attention to? So great answers. And they certainly can relate to all of them. Thank you for that. So with that in mind, let's move into product leaders who, if product managers are the ones that focus on the depth, right? We really develop the tunnel vision. We become an experts. We become just really good at this one area, or maybe a small area of problems. The way I like to think about product leaders and what I've experienced in the past is that product leaders really focusing on the width. And the analogy that I like to think about is the following. So imagine ocean, right? There is the surface of the ocean. We as the product managers, as individual contributors, tend to work underwater. It's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just what it is. And when I say underwater, is that we become really good at understanding this underwater environment. What type of jellyfish is there, fish, what comes in, what do we see at the bottom of the ship when it floats above the water. So we get really good at that. What happens with the product leader is that it's that 360, hopefully 360 view that we get once we peak right above the water. So that's when I talk about width, right? So that's instead of tunnel vision, looking down and looking what's left and right of you underwater. As a product leader, you are stepping up and you finally see the horizon. You see, oh, I see, we actually, and there are other ships floating to the right. So it's all about widening the perspective. So instead of tunnel vision, you almost have to take a step back, or if you like the analogy of the water and the ocean, you need to step up to see what's happening. And the way we would do that as product leaders is instead of focusing on the people, focusing on the discovery and execution, and focusing just on a short-term strategy, we really start thinking a little bit bigger. Let's say, how do teams work together? And when I say teams, it's not just product team, it's R&D team working together with other teams, customer success management, support, sales, pre-sales, executive team. So you really start developing the ways of working or the processes. You also start thinking from the perspective of simplifying something, but not for the sake of simplification, right? Sometimes we might fall victim to the process. And I think that's what actually one of the latest Marty Kagan's articles are all about is, product operations and the processes. And I do agree that once the process becomes the thing, well, it's kind of like a dangerous zone. You don't want to be there. You want your process or frameworks to help you achieve the goal. And the goal could be anything within your team or within your roadmap. And as a leader, you're really focusing on the long-term strategy. So if as a product manager, you potentially were looking at, let's say quarter, maximum a year. As a product leader, you're probably looking 1 year ahead. So 1 year would be the minimum. And you're really looking at 2 years, 3 years. You start working with your executive team, with your leadership team on the vision, defining the broader goals, understanding, so where do we actually take that ship? And what type of tools, what type of products we actually need to get our ship towards that North Star. And you're thinking not just about your customers or your stakeholders or your internal PM team, you really start thinking about your business, the business bottom line, the revenue, how what your team does affects the bottom line and the investor relations. You're thinking about markets and how trends are changing, and if you potentially would want to expand or you want to kind of really focus on this one market. And you're thinking from the perspective of target personas and broader persona kind of profiles rather than a specific set of customers. And so with that, as I kind of explain a little bit about product leadership, I'm curious to hear what do you think are the top 3 skills based on what I shared, based on what you know, based on maybe your manager and how they act, how they lead. What do you think are the top 3 skills for product leaders?
So Gurvin mentioned earlier that communication is a big one, which I tend to agree.
Anything else comes up for anyone?
Gurvin mentioned vision and coach for leaders.
So sounds like having your vision so that your team is behind that, right? So everyone is aligned. And from what I understand, coach probably means from the perspective of developing your team, coaching your team to be better versions of themselves. Okay, I love those. Interpersonal skills and ability to execute. Right, so interpersonal skills, Michelle, I guess that it probably has to do with the emotional intelligence, right? And really the soft skills, something that we in product world don't think about that much until we actually face the leadership path, right? Because up until, beautiful, yeah, because up until then, we really think about hard skills. How do I learn A, B, C? How do I do this? How do I get more technical? And you're right, interpersonal skills and emotional intelligence, just having an awareness, self-awareness, are huge for becoming empowered leaders who empower others and who are lead by example. And I guess by the ability of execute, Michelle, you also would mean execute on that vision, right? So it's actually a really good point, because there is a lot of execution or delivery in the leadership world too. Is just a different level. If before that you were executing in a way above, underneath the water, after you step up in that arena, you're really looking at how would my team execute on that roadmap that we've just built for this year. Great answers. Okay, so let's move to actually, but how do we actually get to that part, right? How do we cross the chasm? And I like to think about it as a chasm, because it's really not that clear to get from where you are as an IC to a product leader, because it requires different skills, as I mentioned before. It really, no more tunnel vision, but expansion. As Michelle mentioned, there is an emotional intelligence, which is probably maybe like 70 or 80% of what you need to learn to become such. But how practically do we move from one place to another? And I would like to introduce complexity framework. And the way we could think about it is, with the time, complexity of your company and your team goes up. You learn new things, you get more people, you start serving more markets. There is a better, different vision. It keeps going up. And as complexity grows, that's where you have an opportunity as a product leader to step in and reduce the complexity. So from that perspective, in order to increase your scope as a product leader, you really need to reduce one of the existing complexities. So what are the complexities? There are probably three complexities. There might be more, but the way I think about them is kind of like umbrellas. So first one is, sorry, someone not muted.
Can you all mute, please?
Oh, I think it's good.
Okay, I think I muted Melina.
Thank you. The stakeholder complexity. Let's talk about that first. So this is how it might feel when you have when your organization has grown to the point where it feels like, hey, we become a feature factory. We don't think about customer outcomes anymore. It feels like stakeholders, I have to constantly manage them and manage expectation. It feels like it's an extra work, and not just an extra, it feels like a second job at some point, depending on how many stakeholders you might have. There feels like a lack of ownership, and the strategy that's supposed to be owned by the product team really doesn't feel like to be owned by anyone. There is also a trend that you might see as the other organizations in your company developing less trust towards product teams, and not just towards people, but mostly towards their decision making. They don't know why the decision was made, why did we push something, why we released something that sales team doesn't think it was beneficial to the customer because they didn't get a contract. And there are really unclear priorities. So it really feels a little bit chaotic, turbulent. It feels like a lot of work. So your role as a product leader here to reduce complexity is to really first And I divide them into 3 umbrellas. Start with transparency. And I'll give you examples for each of the bullet point. So increasing transparency means to start sharing with your stakeholders, how do you make decisions? How do you prioritize your roadmap? Why do you include something, but you exclude something else? Transparency into how you're creating your goals. So it's really including your stakeholder in many processes that you as a product team are developing or you're going through. Because as long as you keep operating in the silo, product team with increased complexity will be felt like it's a little bit outside of the organization, or we don't trust. Why are they making those decisions? People are still unhappy. We still didn't meet our goals. So really introduce that inclusion. And accountability really has to do with who owns what in the process. How do the insights from the sales team, from customer support team, flow back into the product team? Who is accountable for gathering those insights and how do they get communicated? Who is accountable for making sure to share that, hey, this is how we make decisions. We just went through our prioritization framework, and this is the framework that we used. So really figuring out the roles and responsibilities in the way in this process, but still thinking that, process should not come at the sake of just having a process. It's really assigning accountability for every part of that. The second domain of complexity is really about problem domain. So let's say, if you are working on a YouTube and your problem is increasing the number of eyeballs for every specific video that's getting uploaded by your influencers, let's say, this is your problem domain. And the way it might feel when you have complexity, right? Again, with the time we have complexity, it goes up. You might feel like, oh, onboarding is becoming really, really hard. And knowledge is not really shared in a transparent way. No one knows where the knowledge lies. Some people say, oh, go to this PM. They know everything. People eventually leave and the knowledge is lost too. Your product quality and releases are kind of decreasing. So you really get a lot of bugs, unmet goals. Maybe your OKRs are not really, not even transparent, but you don't meet them. Maybe it's at 60 or 70%. You feel like there is no documentation and everything just needs to be manual, repeated. Every time you feel like you start with a problem, suddenly the scope grows into an unmanageable size. And you don't know who can reduce that scope. And all those problems might surface during your PM conversations. If you gather together as a team, you can feel it. You can feel it intuitively because it also feels pretty heavy, chaotic, and it feels very manual. But you also might not feel it because you might get used to it. So the way to reduce that complexity be, again, instead of become a participant into everything that's happening, literally step away. Imagine you're an observer and you're looking at how your team works on a specific problem domain, how the knowledge is getting shared. And imagine you're an observer and trying to see from that perspective. And the way to reduce the complexity around problem domains, really first focusing on fundamentals. And those fundamentals could be anything. Hey, let's finally document our knowledge. Let's figure it out. How do we onboard people and how do they get ramped up really fast on the problems that they need to solve? Let's really figure it out. Who owns what in the process? We can also take all the knowledge that we have and we can either document it or we can turn it in the process. Again, for the sake of solving the problem, not just for the sake of having that process. And really over communication with your engineers, with your designers, with your stakeholders on your specific problem area. And the last complexity is really all about people, right? So complexity grows with the time. You might have more people. You might not have enough people at this point, and that's how you're going to start feeling that there's not enough resources. Suddenly you might need a UX writer. Everyone talks about vision, but from very different vantage points, and it doesn't seem to be one unified vision. There could be one customer success manager who belongs for no reason to your team, to the product team, even though, they kind of really not connected to the product team. You might also kind of feel that there is also unclear ownership in the entire, let's say, R&D process. Who is responsible for discovery? Who participates in discovery? What does execution really mean? When do designers join the conversation? When do engineers join? Who is responsible for testing? So really unclear ownership at every step of that process. You also might feel there are constantly some kind of dependency on one team, on another team. You have to wait, or you have to understand something needs to be done by one team before you start working on your priority. So it really also feels very overwhelming. Something is not enough or too much. And the way you could reduce that people complexity as a leader is first really starting with developing your product vision. Of course, easier said than done, right? I'm not gonna come in on Monday to work and say to my boss, okay, let's develop a vision. But as a product leader, you're looking at these three complexities: stakeholder, problem domain, and the people. You can, in a way, map out your opportunities or pain points. Think about it as Teresa Torres' opportunity tree. You can have all those problems mapped out, and you can figure out, so what is 80-20? What is a problem or complexity that which I solve can generate the biggest impact? It can showcase my expertise and skills as a leader, because I'm going to be leading what seems like a high visibility initiative, hopefully cross-functional. And how can I use that with my manager as a case for my promotion? And that's, of course, if you're a senior product manager. But if you're in the shoes of a product manager or even associate product manager, you can still talk with your manager, and this is going to be your maybe career growth plan on how to eventually get to that leadership role. But with developing product vision, an example could be, let's say you identified that, hey, we're actually really misaligned on internal product vision. There is one thing on the website. Our CEO talks about this in the second way. And we as product managers actually refer to this whole thing as using this language. How can we unify that? So you can serve as a catalyst or the leader of a project or initiative that could involve stakeholders from different parts of organization, your sales, even your CEO, maybe our regional co-founders if they're still present, and your product team, to maybe figure out the framework of how you potentially can go about developing this vision. And you can be both a leader and a facilitator. And the outcome is all the teams aligned. Your executive team is happy. Your marketing team is happy too, because finally there is no gap or miscommunication between these two. And you led a very important and visible project. You can also introduce shared goals. If you are using OKRs or SMART goals in your organization, we tend to kind of separate them into, hey, this belongs to product, this belongs to sales. But you can be the one who can step in this arena and say, hey, if we are talking about acquisition this year, it's really important to us. Acquisition really depends on sales too. There is marketing involved. And of course, there are some gaps in the product that we can, in a way, fill, but we can't do it on our own as a product organization. What if we build a shared OKR goal where someone from sales owns a specific key result, someone from marketing owns, and the product team does? It's not going to happen in one day. In fact, changes never do. It might take you a few weeks, sometimes a few months. I think when it comes to goals, it's probably an initiative that really shouldn't take more than a month or two, if you actually have that time, right? If you're really start working on your annual goals sometime in September. And when it comes to people complexity, you can also shape or help shaping your team culture, right? We all want to work in a product team that feels empowered, feels like a very safe place. There is psychological safety. It feels like we can learn from each other. There is trust. You can bring your best self. You can bring your full self to the workplace. And you know that if you make a mistake, no one's gonna judge you. Potentially you just talk about it, you'll share the learnings, and everyone moves on. So you can be facilitator of that change. It also doesn't happen overnight, but if you identify specific problems within this umbrella of a team culture, kind of opportunities or pain points, you can pick a very specific thing, and you can partner up with your manager to make sure they're aware of this big initiative that you're leading. You can get support from your peers, maybe from other people and stakeholders in the organization who've done something similar to learn from them. And really take your team from, the one that feels like they're not really aligned to the one that feels, oh yeah, we know what we're doing. We're really a team. We celebrate successes. We're building on each other's knowledge. We celebrate just the way we are, each other, how we show up to the work day every day. So as we're getting closer to the end, moving on to our Q&A, I want to leave you with 3 takeaways. If there was nothing else you remember from the presentation, I would like for you to remember 3 things. First is, don't wait for a title. We tend to kind of get stuck on that. We tend to think that I'm not a leader until I have a role. GPM, a director. And yes, it's true in a way, right? Sometimes when we feel like we've been in the shoes of senior product manager for like 3 to 5 years, you can feel like I'm stuck in a way, right? But leadership really starts with you. It starts with you, as I mentioned, getting really clear on what you want, changing your mindset from having a tunnel vision to developing the width, looking above the water. And it starts with you taking actions, having a career conversation with your manager, developing a plan on how to address a complexity. If you find, which I'm pretty sure 99.9, you will find a complexity in one of those 3 domains in your organization, and you develop a plan on how to execute that and really get support from as many people as possible. And on the last point, get support and execute. I really want to make it clear that you cannot do this on your own. There are forces and there are people beyond you and above you, and you really want to get their support. Partner up with them. Find peers, find mentors, find other people in the organization higher than you or at the same level, doesn't matter. Someone who gets behind your vision for how to solve this specific pain point or introduce this opportunity as you're solving a complexity. Get their support. Make sure your manager is aligned. Make sure that they really track your progress and they know that there are measurable outcomes as you move from point A to point B to point C. And there are really understanding what's awaiting for you at the end of the execution, successful execution of this initiative. How would you assess some of those skills, such as executing on a high visibility leadership project, on working skillfully with others, really showcasing or presenting your emotional intelligence, being self-aware of your internal world, but also how do you get perceived by others, having clear communication and being influential in a way that helps everyone else solve problems so that you always create this win-win situation. But as I mentioned, that's just the tip of an iceberg, right? There's a lot of work that actually kind of goes into creating the change. But even with that tip of an iceberg that I walk you through today, if today you see some pain points, opportunities, you have not just a chance, you have a very good chance or probability to take something from being a pain to something that's being solved as you are moving towards the product leader. So change, as I mentioned, change is hard, kind of just understanding. So which changes do I start with? And how do I prioritize them? How do I map them all? How do I figure it out, 80-20? And how do I actually execute on them? And that's something that I wanted to finish before we go into Q&A, is that's something that I will be doing as a part of a head of product 4-month career program that starts at the end of February. And it's really decomposing and deconstructing the complexity framework that I shared with you that goes for 4 months. And we're really, me and my co-founder, really helping you and coaching you and supporting you along with other 8 people in your group to get from where you are to celebrate your success. And with that, let's move into Q&A.
Feel free to come off mute or type your questions in the chat here.
I have a question. How would you utilize this if, say, you were transitioning organizations? Say, potentially there aren't opportunities at your current place of business, so you need to seek out opportunities elsewhere while still holding that senior PM title and maybe not wanting to start over somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying, Kelsey, you're transitioning into senior PM in another organization?
Potentially that, or maybe even trying to skip the senior PM and transition to like a group product manager or something like that within a new organization.
Yeah, great question. So thinking about Complexities Framework, the thing is it's repeatable and it's scalable. You can use it in your first 90 days in a role. Let's say you make a deal with your hiring manager that, hey, first 90 days, I'm going to solve one of the biggest problems that are important to leadership. That's just not necessarily just within the product team, but outside. It might be quite a bit of work because you also need to find out and learn the organization in this 90 days, right? So there is some things might not just kind of come together. But given that the framework is reusable, it's possible. It will be harder, to be honest. I think it'll be harder to do it in a new organization, right? Especially if you're joining as a senior PM. But after, let's say, a few weeks, maybe usually it takes us about 60 days, right, to kind of like start getting a little bit more familiar with how things actually working and what I do here. I think there is a way to apply it, because you don't forget, you're actually going to have an advantage of a beginner's mindset, right? So you come in and instead of kind of preserving the status quo, you can actually make it your initiative to solve something really important as a GPM. And being an observer in this case, because you just joined, actually might be much more easier for you to identify what does that pain point look like and what is the opportunity. But in general, it feels like it might work better, at least if you are trying to get kind of promoted within the same organization. But that's not to say that it's not repeatable, because it is, and you can apply it to pretty much any problem that you experience during your career. Did I answer your question, Avi?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, anyone?
We had a couple of questions pre-submitted, right, Limor? Why don't we
do
those?
Yeah. Do you want me to read them out loud?
Sure.
I think you.
Yeah. That would be great.
Yeah. So, did you answer the 3 ones that we talked about? How to expand your scope and the skills we already touched, I feel, and common problems companies expecting product leaders to solve? Or do you want to touch on those?
I'll touch quickly on those. I think with the scope,
Yeah.
goes directly to reducing the complexity, right? So think about scope is you being above the water. Again, you don't have to wait for it. It might be more difficult in some organizations versus others, right? And I've been lucky enough personally to be working somewhere where I could take that initiative, but I recognize that some organizations, even like enterprises, big ones, might be more difficult to kind of even like break through in a way. But I do encourage you to still brainstorm with your peers, brainstorm with your manager. If your manager is not necessarily the leader you aspire to be, and I've certainly had a couple in my past career. What about skip manager, skip level manager? Maybe someone within an organization you can get support and who can help you to brainstorm on what does being above the water means. What does it mean to look at solve something within people domain, within your problem domain, or within your stakeholder? And when it comes to, so that's for the scope. I think we touched on the skills. What was the third one, Limor?
Sorry, I need to unmute. What are common problems companies
common
expect product leaders to solve? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And the common problems they do lie within those three domains. They could be solved with the processes. They could be solved with introduction of a new, if we're talking about problem area, maybe it's combining two problem areas into one, right? So you don't introduce new process here. You just finding synergies in a way within what's already exists. But mostly when it comes to being a product leader is like trying to answer the question, how do we make sure that the team delivers what's the most important for the business and for the customer? Mm-hmm. So that's right. That's the ultimate question. And you being a leader who sits between these two is really all about steering that ship to make sure that your team is working always on the right thing. They have tools, they have knowledge, they're empowered to make decisions on their own. There is no micromanagement. Everyone is really coming to work and coming to decision making, feeling like they can do it on their own. And at the same time, you know that what they're working on is directly impacting the goal or the bottom line in a way that everyone expects. So in a way that should be impacted towards growth, towards sustainability, scalability, whatever the goal is.
We have a question somehow related, I think, to what you answered on our LinkedIn live audience. Tanisha is asking, what skills should you focus on developing to make the transition?
Mm-hmm. I would start with, let's think about a couple. So I would start with really switching your focus from, getting new courses to learn about A/B testing or the different frameworks to develop your, again, emotional intelligence, your interpersonal skills. And interpersonal skills is really, it's a big umbrella. It has a lot in that communication. There is a storytelling. There is ability to be influential and charismatic in a way, right? So that your team feels the support and the team feels strength and the power behind your presence. There is courage. There is vulnerability. Vulnerability to show up with your fullest self. Vulnerability to admit mistakes. I would also focus on people skills, of course, right? Because I think that's kind of like a chicken and egg problem that I personally ran into, and I know a lot of people are and will like to transition to even a group product manager. The first question you might get is like, oh, have you managed people before? And if you were a senior PM, well, you haven't, right? Because I mean, you didn't get a chance. Like that's why you actually want to be a GPM or director, so you could. And my advice, so the way I started with that is mentorship. So mentorship within your team, mentorship outside your team, coaching aspiring PMs, coaching people or helping others to break into the field. university programs that also MBA students trying to understand and to move up into product leadership. So there are a lot of unofficial ways of kind of stepping a little bit into this new area of skills. But of course, to actually have an official way, we need to get a title. So I would do recommend take advantage of any mentorship opportunities and make them aware to your manager, right? It needs to be communicated. There needs to be a plan that, hey, I take on this 2 new associate product managers, or hey, I'm participating in this mentorship program outside of organization, and I'll be working with 2 mentees. This is where they are today, the benchmark, and this is where they want to be in the next 3 months, right? So you actually do need to show the progress your mentees are making as you're working with them, because it's going to be exactly the same with people, right? When you people management, when you finally managing your first team of product managers, there needs to be outcomes, there needs to be results. So you can start documenting them even with your mentees.
Definitely. And I just want to highlight that we have our mentorship program. I mean, that's one of the reasons we created a mentorship program at Part of Fly, to support your career. And we have Katya, she's incredible. She's one of our mentors, and we have other mentors for sure. And just generic comment like about being promoted to the next level. Think about operating at the next level in order to be promoted. So if it's like moving from a product manager to a group product manager, and I'm not coming like from the product board, but I would think about, okay, what kind of expectations your company have from the next level, and how can you already execute at least to some degree at that level, whether it's helping teams work better together, thinking about things from a higher level, more strategically, not just about your product, but basically maybe about, other priorities of the company and how everything kind of, goes hand in hand. Just think at the next level.
Yeah, and I think that you're totally right, Limor. And I think that next level also has to do with going back to, again, that tunnel vision that really I want you to really think about it as you're going back to work, right, to your day-to-day, and see yourself, okay, am I tunnel in the vision? Like, am I developing this kind of rabbit hole vision, or am I thinking wide? The same concept applies to when you and I see, when I was in IC, I was really thinking about my own results, right? So it's always all about me. How do I deliver? What do I deliver? When do I deliver? Outcomes, etc. So it always feels like the world is kind of spinning around me. And changing my mindset from thinking about me to thinking about us. And it's really not about me, it's actually about team. It's about maybe even them more than about us. That for me was kind of a huge breakthrough in the way that it really changes your mindset. So you see how the world is not spinning around you. It's not about you. It's not personal. It's just the way things are. And now the results are from your team. If something happened, it's all of you. It's not just you. It's the team. So to me, that mindset change from me to us was a pretty big deal. And I have to say, it's really difficult to let go. It's difficult to stop thinking, from my perspective, from wanting to help by giving advice versus asking a question and helping your team member to actually find their own answer, instead of challenging them kind of like in a micromanaging way. You approach the situation and you start really asking, again, questions and guiding them to figure it out on their own. So that was a big change. And I think that's a skill. It's both a skill, now a capacity, and also a mindset that really starts with a behavior, right? Because if we think about mindset change, it's really behaviors. What type of behaviors can we develop that could support this new mindset from me to us?
Absolutely. And we have just 3 more minutes. I just wanted to ask another pre-submitted question that we haven't touched on. Someone was asking about, they are doing a product manager basically a job, but the title of the company they are at does not reflect that. So I guess the title is not a product manager, is a different title. How would they reflect? The question is how to reflect what they're doing on their resume and on their LinkedIn profile.
Yeah, that's tricky. That's always tricky, right? I remember when I was looking through the resumes, there is a bias, and I caught myself thinking about that too. When I see the responsibilities, but I don't see the title, it feels to me, oh, do I really want them on my team? Because it's because I know they might be lacking something. So it's definitely bias and something to step away from, but it exists. So the reason I'm bringing it up is that it's going to be tough. The best, I see a couple of options. One option is, when I also work with some of my product managers and clients, is that can you go back to your company, to your manager, and advocate for a title change? Is it even something that might exist in your organization? I understand some organization might not even have it. All they have is business analyst, right? And business analyst would do kind of what a product manager, but I would argue maybe a little bit more as a product owner domain. But go back to your manager, talk with them to see if they can support the title change. I don't necessarily like when people change their titles, just to kind of fit in. But when you think about resume and kind of passing through the keywords tool, it's going to be tough if you don't have the skills, or if you do have a skill but you don't have a title, it might be more difficult. So your best bet would be probably write something in your objectives. Let's say if you're trying to transition, you're working on your resume, write an objective or write a short summary that reflects where you're trying to go and what you've been doing before, in a way, right? So if you were a part of what seems like a product team, but you just never got a title, try to mention that. And in your responsibilities, so rather the outcomes, right? Because from the product management perspective in the resumes, we want to talk about outcomes and accomplishments, and of course responsibilities, but that's really secondary. Think about what outcomes can you share within the resume, but also during the interviews that you can talk to. How can you create a story that's still very compelling, that tells you a situation, how it is, but also really makes you come across as a strong product manager, even if you didn't have that title in the past. So all it is to say, it's not going to be easy, but that's possible. And I've seen people doing that. Just really think about your story and creating your resume based on that.
Thank you. That's a great answer. I think on LinkedIn, there are opportunities to use the product manager title maybe elsewhere, like in your headline, in your summary section, in the about section, and also in the description of what you have done. You can say, oh, I have done a role of a product manager, or I have done those things that are part of like a product role, and just use this keyword, because as you mentioned, Katya, it's very important that you use the right keywords to be found for jobs that you're interested in. It seems like we are about to end. It's been fascinating. Tanya, one last question I have for you. How can people reach out to you if they want to, try your workshop or contact you? Maybe you want to share this slide again or whatever. Just share contact information with our audience.
Yeah, you know what? Let me share quickly the slide so you can capture it. Here we go. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You can always email me at katarina@suchkova.com. Also have a website. You can submit your form. And if you're interested in the program, and I'm personally very proud of what we've created. I wish I had that when I was a senior PM. Is you can email us at jump@the-head-of-product. And if you participate in the webinar or you tuned in, you listened, we would like to also offer you a discount to join our next cohort. So yeah, different ways. I'm not that active on Twitter, but definitely LinkedIn and email. I'm pretty responsive usually. And thank you for being here, everyone. Thank you for your great questions. And yeah, it was a pleasure to be here with all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was incredible. You gave us so much value, and I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn and check out also on our website on all of the other events that we have. And we'll see you there. And I'm also on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions about our mentorship program. And if there's anything that we can help you, we're always here for you. Thank you so much, Katya. Have a wonderful rest of your day and everyone else. And we'll see you in the next event.
Thank you all.
Thank you.